that's always been one of the driving forces in my life was knowing the responsibility I have to try to be the best I can be because I know of those who died for me to even have this opportunity. The traits I got from my father was my faith, save money, always live beneath my means, and love my family like no other. Be there for them and just be the best father and husband I could ever be in my life. My mother, I got the gift of laughter. With her being a Delta Sigma Theta, I also learned that they can get a little bossy at times, but I learned how to live with it. And but my mother was extremely smart, but she really gave me my what I call kind of free spirit and joy. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, and speaking of that, just kind of talking about your early childhood, I'd be interested just to hear you talk a little bit about your childhood sexual assault and how it shaped your life and how you've grown from the terrible
Right.
situation that happened to you.
So I want to be real clear. It wasn't a sexual assault because sexual assaults are violent. I was groomed. It was sexual abuse. There's a big difference. And so I don't ever claim assault because people who've been assaulted is usually there's violence. There was no violence. I was groomed, and grooming is something that 90% of predators is someone in the family or close to the family. Ours is someone close to the family. So it was the grooming and that's what predators do real well. Predators are very good at what they do, and the problem is so often, when I came along, parents and stuff were taught to watch, stranger danger, to watch the person you don't know. But in reality, that's not the issue. It's the people who are close who you have to really pay attention to who are around children, maybe a little bit more than they should, or it's this thing, and you have to prepare your children how to know no and that and how to say no or what's inappropriate. And again, I can't. This happened in the mid '60s to me, so that was not really something talked about. And most of the time, even today, it's just swept under the rug, and it goes on. And that's why I like Dr. Nassar and the guy at Penn State. And when you usually hear about a predator who gets finally caught, the number of victims is so high because people either ignore it or they don't want to believe it, and they just tell the child normally, well, we'll just keep you away from that person. But that predator still is able to groom and do their thing. So there's a big difference between sexual assault and sexual abuse because that's grooming and no violence.
Yes. And from that, like, what was advice you needed in that moment that you didn't get that now talking to people that have been sexually abused that you can give to them now?
Well, I think the big thing is don't blame yourself. I blamed myself for years. I ended up dealing with anxiety and panic attacks later in life when I finally addressed it because I had planned on dying with my secret. I wasn't planning on ever saying a word to it, but once I started having, um, effects of it, panic attacks and a complete nervous breakdown, which I had to suffer in silence because my business was only 4 years old. I tell people now, don't wait to get help. Get help as soon as you can. And parents, believe your children until something's proven different, that they're not telling the truth, they say they're abused. And be careful and pay attention who you leave your children with. But at the same time, predators, you can't really, they're good at what they do. That's why they're predators. But there are a lot of organizations like Darkness to Light. There's a lot of child advocacy centers in cities where you can get information on the things to look out for and how to protect and give your children the strength that they need to know how to say no or something's going on.
Yeah, and so you're going through this, and you're still, as you're saying, fighting through the fear, and then you start your own company. I believe in 1992, correct? Or no, 80s, 88, 88.
Yeah.
But because you told everybody in 1992, or you told your wife in 1992 that that was when
Right.
you first came. Okay, but so you start your own company. You're 4 years in, and just explain to us a little bit how you're able to balance um, running a whole company while also going through just trauma and holding on through business.
I would just say God had a plan for me because I really should have been in a hospital, but I wasn't. And I would go into work for a couple hours a day. My wife, who had finished nursing school as an RN, would help me get together to go to meetings. I missed a lot of meetings because I was just having anxiety issues. Somehow I navigated it, but one of the things I think that I navigated reason I did because I couldn't fail for my children and my wife. I had to see it through. But that was the toughest couple of years I ever experienced, and I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemies for anybody to have to go through what I went through of suffering in silence. Because at the time, trauma wasn't. You didn't think what could happen to you as a child could be affecting you as a 36-year-old person. And some people it affects much later in life. I've gotten to know some survivors that this has been, they've lost marriages and all kind of stuff because when it finally hit them and to deal with it, they just couldn't handle it. They didn't want to be around anybody. So, even though we say children are resilient, we forget that children become adults and have to deal with some things that are not easy.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, Uncle Moody, I thank you so much for your patience today and coming on and speaking with us. Just how you have moved through from this, what you're saying right now, which is incredibly heavy, and thank you for sharing, to becoming um, a leader in your position, in your role. How do you see, looking back on your life and taking a step back or an overview, how has the fighting through the fear helped you become a better leader?
Well, I got therapy, but my therapy in the beginning in 92, 93, and maybe late 90s, it was more so to understand panic attacks and anxiety. It wasn't until 2021 that I finally got a trauma therapist because I felt my body starting to break down again because all I did was power through. And powering through is something many of us do in life where we just power through stuff. But when you power through constantly, it wears your body down. It wears you down emotionally. So I felt myself, I had a breakdown in 92, and I felt myself 28 years later starting to get those same symptoms. But this time I knew what they were. And immediately, Carla, my wife, went on psychologytoday.com and found me a good trauma therapist who's a Morehouse man. And I did cognitive behavioral therapy, and that changed my life. And that's one reason why I hiked Mount Kilimanjaro last year.
Absolutely, and going a little bit into the business side of things, when it comes to like negotiation and partnerships, how did you get some of those early deals that kind of help you sustain your company for now? It's been 36 years, but what were those early years of your business like?
Well, it's interesting. The early years of my business is just survival mode. You're just hoping you can make it. You eat what you kill. Undercapitalized like most of us, like you guys doing your app. You didn't have a big crowd fund where you had unlimited cash to put into it. You guys had to work, you had to save, you had to, get some investors or whatever. But there's one thing I've learned: when you can exhale and breathe and not worry about payroll or having enough money, you run a company totally different than when you're in survival mode constantly and wondering will you even, make it. I mean, so that's kind of how I ran the business in the beginning. For a number of years, it's like, man, I just want to survive. And then I got to a point sometime like, man, I think I'm just going to get me a job. But I just never gave up, and God just kept blessing me. And my wife and I have we don't have a expensive lifestyle, so we were able to keep putting money into the company and survive the tough times too, because we've been through the Great Recession, a couple other recessions. Not enough work at times. I even thought about taking a couple of investors. One of them was actually Michael Jordan. I got in '91. I actually still have the picture where he autographed. It says, "Congratulations, Dave, to our success in the construction business." At the last minute, I turned him down. And his financial person said I was the first person to ever turn him down. But in reality, the reason I gave was I wanted to know what I could do on my own. But in reality, about 6 months later, God was going to take me through something that, with that nervous breakdown, that they might have taken my business from me. Because people didn't, back in those days, and even now, if a person said they had a nervous breakdown, a mental breakdown, they would look at as weak and, not capable. So that's one of the reasons I speak up, because people go, "Man, I never would have thought those things happened to you." Well, that's why I do it, because I want people to see we all go through something, but don't think somebody's weak, and don't think of yourself as weak, because you got to deal with some, trauma. And trauma comes in many forms. It can be being raised in an alcoholic family, or physical abuse, sexual abuse. Poverty is trauma. Being black at times can be trauma. So there are many things that people are impacted. And unfortunately, a lot of people take destructive lifestyles with drugs, alcohol, or some other things to ease the pain. And I understand. I mean, I'm fortunate that I didn't, but I do understand why people do, because that pain of trauma can be overwhelming at times if you're not careful. I'm just one of the blessed, fortunate ones.
That story, I've heard it before, the Michael Jordan story. I think it goes back into my initial question about just you being an excellent leader, because 9 out of 10 people would have accepted that offer. And I think that goes to show the character and the person that you are, Mr. Moody, or Uncle Moody. Being in Chicago, and Michael Jordan, such a icon of Chicago. I know you grew up in Chicago, and being in architecture, where did the love of architecture come from or stem from?
It's interesting. When I was growing up, you got to remember, when I was growing up, it was before computers, internet, and all that. So a lot of the boys, older boys in my neighborhood, were going to technical high schools, and they were becoming draftsmen. So back in the day, drafts people had to do all of the work, and had to do a really big thing, and they did all the drawings. And I always played with Lego building blocks, erector sets. So my real thought was I was going to be a draftsman. Then when we moved to Ann Arbor, Michigan, when I was 14, my dad started working at the University of Michigan. I met my first black architect. I was about 15 probably. And when I met him and went by his office and got to know him, I said, "Man, I want to be an architect. I don't want to just do the drawings for an architect. I want to design." So that was my original goal. And then I went to Morehouse, where I met your dad, who's one of my dearest and closest friends. And, I'm really proud of, and I've known your mother since we were all in school, but, she came to school real young. I'm just going to say that. How's that? She came to school at about 12 to college. She's a lot younger than me and your dad. And so I finished Morehouse. Your dad and I went to Ann Arbor after Morehouse together. He was in grad school. I was taking architectural courses. He got his master's, and I went to D.C. Then he came to law school out there. So we were roommates there and in Ann Arbor. And so I went to Howard for architecture school. Then I started my career with Bechtel Power Corporation, one of the largest engineering construction companies in the world. And I was in the nuclear power division as a staff architect. And my dad always told me, he said, "Son, wherever they want you to go, you go. That way you always have a job." So they say, "Hey, we need an architect to go to a nuclear power plant site." construction sites. I said, hell, I go. And that's where I made my pivot. I got out there with the hard hat, the work boots, the noise, the action. And I said, yeah, this is me. This is who I am. The noise, the action, and I made my pivot. So even though my passion was architecture, what I would be good at doing is construction. And like I said, the proof is in the pudding. So I always tell people, we got to be careful telling children and people, yeah, go for your passion. Yeah, but you got to know what you're good at doing. So I didn't quit. I just changed direction. I took the knowledge of architecture into construction. That's like if somebody has a passion for singing, want to be a singer, well, suppose they can't sing. But they could be a great songwriter, a great producer, a great director. So you got to really know what are you good at doing versus what is your passion. We got to be careful because a lot of people have been stuck chasing their passion their whole life and never achieve what they could have achieved because we are all created to be incredible if we can get out our own way and deal with the different, things that hold us back mentally, which can be from trauma and all kind of stuff.
Yes, and if you're in the audience, please raise your hand if you have a question. We'll make sure to get your question in as well. You're Uncle Moody. You're talking a little bit about construction and tools. I'm curious to hear what should be in a 30-year-old's toolkit for success, and like what do you see a lot of young entrepreneurs like what kind of choices do they make that you look back and say I made that mistake, or I wish I what are some mistakes you see young entrepreneurs make?
All right, here's the thing I would tell my 30-year-old self again. I would have more confidence in myself to begin with. I would dream much bigger. I would not be afraid of success, but I also would not be in a rush. None of this happens fast. Because here's the thing, when you start getting middle aged, like me and your dad, your mom's not middle aged yet. When you start getting middle aged like me and your dad, not middle aged, I mean senior citizens. Here, we're senior citizens. Your mom's middle aged, but your dad and I are senior citizens. When you start realizing, I wish I hadn't have been in such a rush for things. I mean, times, like when you're 21, when you're 16, you can't wait till you're 21, and then you can't wait till you're 30. You're always in a rush. And before you know it, you're 68 years old or older, if you're fortunate enough to live that long. So the biggest thing I would tell a young person is to dream big. Don't be in such a rush. Enjoy the journey and embrace the things you're going to go through. Tough times make tough people. And I guess the last thing I would say is be present. And what I mean by that, there were many times early in my career in business where I would be at events. I was physically there, but I wasn't mentally or emotionally there because I was busy thinking about a project or a job or, issue, payroll, whatever. And I missed a lot of things from a sensory standpoint. And now, like when I'm with my friends, when I'm with my family, when I'm in anything, I really try to be present. And every now and then I have to catch myself where I'm drifting because I'm thinking of something else and I'm not present. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, yes, that makes sense. And you were talking about it a little bit earlier, but I want to know, like, how did your spiritual side develop? Because when it comes to life, you have to you have to develop both sides. It's more than just a flesh. It's also a spiritual side. So talk about when that kind of developed. Has it always been there for you, or you're walking that faith?
Well, let me say this. As I said earlier, my dad instilled in me by his actions. My dad read his upper room every morning. Well, it was called Daily Bread, the one he read. He read that every morning. My, neither one. They weren't like big church goers. Like we didn't go every Sunday, but my dad instilled that in me. And then just the things I've been through in my life, I know there is a God. There's, for me to even be standing here today doing what I'm doing, there's a God. There's no doubt about it. And now I'm spending my life, the rest of my life, really trusting my faith and taking steps and going for stuff based on faith and trusting my faith and not being afraid and not trying to do it myself or think I have to lead or, I'm in this by myself.
Yeah, so me and Chris had an opportunity to talk to Miss Lloyda Lewis, and she's the wife of Reginald Lewis. One thing I asked her, and I'd love to hear your answer too, is how did you balance having a family life and a business career? Because so many entrepreneurs that you see can't do it or have struggled doing it. Like when it comes to life partners and all that, can you talk a little bit about having that good relationship there?
Well, I made a decision early in my career that my family would always come first. So my business could have been much bigger, probably sooner, if I would have decided, I'll just see y'all when I see y'all. I just wanted to make sure we could have a good living, but I could be in my children's lives. I made everything in school. We did a bunch of stuff together. I probably attended more stuff than they wanted me to attend. But my dad, kind of taught me that about being a father and a husband. So the business was a way for us to live. It was never about how much money we could have. So my family has always been first in my life. There's no ifs, but even today.
Yes, and other thing I've been fascinated a bunch recently about is sustained success over a long period of time. So when it comes to that 30 years of business, and you talk about never missing a payroll and some of those things, what are some of those things that helped you sustain a business for so long? Because I think even last year you had one of your best years. So how did you continue to have success over and over again?
Fear of failure. I was more afraid for, here's the thing, when you're a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, you have your self-esteem is shaky, but I was really good at faking. But man, I just never wanted people to say I knew he couldn't make it. That drove me more than anything, and I didn't want to fail in front of my children. So those probably aren't good reasons, but that's what drove me. I just, because I wasn't a Phi Beta Kappa, in college. I wasn't an A student. I wasn't a B student. I was a C student. So nobody, really expected me to do much of anything. So I just didn't want to prove them wrong. But that's the other thing that's kind of cool. When people aren't expecting much out of you, it makes it real easy to go for stuff because ain't nobody expecting nothing out of you. I feel bad for the folks who are the straight A students, the Phi Beta Kappas and all that, where everybody's like, ooh, what you gonna do? What you gonna do? And there's pressure on them. Us C students, ain't nobody thinking we're gonna do nothing. So we just kind of slide in, and before you know it, there we are.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
Uncle Moody, that C student line really struck a chord with me. I just wanted to ask you back to the book. What was your writing style like? I know you co-authored this book, but what was your writing? Were you writing 20 pages a night?
Well, it was
busy human. So, how did you find the time to just tell your story?
Well, my book comes from a blog I started called Moody Speaks 11 years ago. Getting ready for my 25th anniversary in business, I decided to do every week I would write a story about 1 year in business. So I pretty much had the outline in there. And then, Uncle Chuck, rest in peace, he, who's a writer, I decided to do this book. So he would send me prompts to write on. And then we got it together. Then he came and spent a week here at the house, and we finished that book in a week. I mean, we crammed it, but but I already had so much information in my blog that then we just expanded on it.
So would you say just like, since it came out in a week, was it just, do you say it was already built out, or was it like stuff that needed to pull out? Did Chuck help you pull it out, or was it just like it flew out?
No, Uncle Chuck, some flew and some he pulled, because he came with some really good questions and things that make me dig deep and things that, I didn't even think about. So when I say we did it in a week, but we had been working for a few months leading up to that, and I already had 6 months worth of blog posts to build on.
Gotcha.
So I don't want to act like we just wrote the whole book in 1 week. It's when we finalized it, it was like 1 week where we got the meat and potatoes, and then we had to send it to a proofreader and all that. But it probably overall was a 6 to 8 month process.
Gotcha. And can you talk a little bit about health? The reason I ask is because it seems as if a lot of Black entrepreneurs who could have continued that wealth generation ended up getting sick or early into their process of making money. Can you talk a little bit about when you started getting into health and how you've sustained? Because I know you even climbed Mount Kilimanjaro just last. I guess that was it a year ago or 2 years ago?
No, last year.
Last year, yeah, just last year.
Okay, your dad and I have always been in physical fitness because see, when we were in college playing football, we always was trying to see who was the strongest and all that stuff. So that's just been natural. And then I got into it more so after dealing with my anxiety and panic attacks and stuff to just help me deal with that. And I've just kept with it because one of the things I've learned as I age and looking at some of my classmates and just people in my age group, those who stop moving early in life start having issues with movements and stuff, and I also go to the doctor every 6 months for just checkups. I get an annual physical, but then 6 months later, I get a blood test just to make sure that's good. I go to a cardiologist. I go to a pulmonary person. I got a sleep apnea machine. Even though I'm just on the border, I sleep so much better over the last 5 years getting that, or the last 4 years. So I really stay on top of my health, and then I'm married to an RN, so that helps too. But I tell you, it's important that you get proper sleep, eat well, and exercise, and take care of your spiritual and mental health, because mental health and performance go hand in hand.
Yeah, and something else is also humor, and you have a lot of it. So talk to me about how humor has helped you go through the traumas and getting over some of those things too.
Well, you know what? You always hear a lot of comedians say, most comedians have tragic lives, they say. So they tend to make people laugh so they themselves can laugh. So I believe deep down on the side, that's probably part of the reason. But I've been like this since I was a kid. My mother was like this, just laughter and stuff. So that's the one blessing I take, that even though I dealt with childhood sexual abuse, I never lost my desire for laughter and fun. And I always told myself through life, even though what happened to me was horrible as a child, it's such a small piece of my life. Even though it's impacted me incredibly, I always remind myself, but don't ever let that take all your joy. And that's kind of what helped me get through it. I said, I can't let that person win. I said, if I don't recover and be all I can be, I let that predator win. And so I'm a person, I don't want to let people who hurt me win, or people say I can't do something win. So I might have strange ways of being motivated, but that's what it is.
This is my last question, and thank you so much for your time, Uncle Moody. It's been an honor. I feel like I've learned even more about you in this time. Looking at the next years down the line, 5, 10, whatever it is for you, with your company, how do you see the success you've built and your name and your legacy with this company moving forward?
Well, what the plan is, I'm going to I'm planning the next generation. I got some folks now, my kids are in the company. I got some other key folks in the company. So I'm grooming that next generation. I know my time is coming to where I just want to be chairman. And the next generation, and my goal is, I hope this company will be here over 100 years. So that's what I'm putting in position. And I won't get to see it except from heaven. But that's my plan. And I'm training that next generation to take over.
And I lied. I have one last question. Will there be a sequel book? Or is it the next book you want to write?
I'm thinking about writing a book on my hiking Mount Kilimanjaro because I learned a lot on that mountain.
Yeah, Chris, LaDonna's trying to get a question in. If you can bring her up to the stage. Also, Uncle Moody, I wanted to know because in 1996 the Olympics came to Atlanta and it created a huge amount of economic wealth. Opportunities for people that are in business in Atlanta. And now the 2026 World Cup is coming to Atlanta. What do you see? Do you think there could be a similar opportunity for business owners in Atlanta?
It'll be not as much because there was so much construction that had to get built during the Olympics. Okay. The Olympics catapulted my business because we were partners building the Olympic Stadium and Turner Field, and that was the Olympics is what took me to a whole nother level. Confidence, finances, everything.
Gotcha. Chris, if you can get that question up to the stage, that'd be great. Another question, Uncle Moody, is how have you been able to sustain, be humble in these moments? Because I know a lot of people can let a lot of success get to their head. How have you been able to? I know it probably goes back to your faith and all that, but as general, how have you been able to handle that?
A couple ways. One, the greatest compliment I get from people are, man, you ain't changed a lick. Or people who don't really know me meet me and go, I never would have thought you were C.D. Moody, the construction guy, because you're just so regular. I just never want to be a person that people, like, man, he's a jerk. But also, I remember when I was first starting out in business, and I won't name the people, but it was a couple of people who were very successful black entrepreneurs. And I went to speak to them just to say hello and, can I just feel your energy? Man, they treated me like crap. And I'll never forget how bad I felt. And I said, I will never make somebody feel like that.
Yeah, that's good. Also, speaking of that, kind of how have you been able to do business with internationally as well as just different races and backgrounds? Have you noticed any difference? Or I know business is business, but
one thing Morehouse does well, it teaches us that we can be in a room with kings or queens or a homeless person, and we're gonna treat them all the same, and we're gonna treat them in a way that they'll respect us. And I've never been intimidated by different environments. And I think the other thing too, coming out of South Chicago at 14, and then moving to Ann Arbor, Michigan, and which is all predominantly white. It was only maybe 20 in my graduating class of black folks out of 620 graduates. I learned a very valuable lesson because I grew up, in the 60s and early 70s, especially in the 60s, there were no black shows. So, I'm looking at Leave It to Beaver, Father Knows Best, all them shows. So I thought white people's lives were perfect. And, and nobody got pregnant in high school and nobody was poor or nothing. And then when I moved to Ann Arbor, I said, oh, okay. Because one of the things I learned, the wealthy white folks didn't like the poor white people. They called them greasers back then. So I realized money plays a big role how people treat other people. Then race definitely creeps in. But it was in Ann Arbor that I realized I'm equal to any of those folks.
Yeah, Morehouse is one of those schools that really does it builds you up no matter where you come from, your background. Just really a great school for that. One of the audience questions that we did receive was, how did you start the company financially? What was the process of getting it off the ground?
I actually, I was able somehow to borrow about $3,000, and I had an opportunity in underground Atlanta, and I was able to turn that into about $10,000. And from there, I just kept getting little projects, and somehow I kept making it. But also, in the beginning, that's what I tell entrepreneurs: you got to be billable costs in the beginning. In other words, you can't have a bunch of overhead and you hiring everybody to do the work, and then you're just overhead because you're eating your profit. So I was a project manager, superintendent, and estimator for the first 3 or 4 years of my company. So I could bill for that on a project, so I knew I would get paid. Because I don't understand being an entrepreneur and I can't get paid. To me, that just ain't working.
Yeah, that's it. That's a great point. And when we talk to investors, that's kind of the first thing they always tell you is make sure you pay yourself too. Because you need to, because otherwise you're going to be stressing and a lot of things that go into business. One last question. I was trying to get somebody else up on stage because they had a question, but what's the nicest thing anybody's ever done for you throughout business? Who have been some of your business heroes? People that we should look up, should read about, anything like that?
I mean, it's a lot of different people. I mean, Herman Russell, Tommy Holder, Larry Gillistadt. I mean, people for different reasons. Sometimes it's just a nice word, or you can make it. Being patient with me, giving me words of wisdom. I mean, my one buddy, when we got certain meetings, let me fly on his private jet, and I tell you, you get spoiled real quick with that.
I bet.
I mean, you drive to the hangar. They park your car, and when you land coming back, your car is the step of the plane. It's nice. But it's really, to me, the people who've helped me the most were just people who were cheering for me in my corner. I mean, your dad is probably one of my biggest cheerleaders. If I'm having, over these 36 years when I felt like, man, I had enough of this, your dad's one of those folks who go, man, come on, you can do it, don't give up. So it's a lot of people who just gave me those words when I needed to hear it. And that's probably why in 2012 I started speaking publicly about what happened to me as a child, because I realized I can help a lot of people just sharing my story. I'm not a therapist. I'm just a survivor who shares their story. Hey, just relax. It'll be okay. Learn from it, figure out what the bugs are. But that's part of entrepreneurship and growth is you're going to have things that don't go right away, but it's called lessons learned. How do you learn from it? How do you fix it? And then you move on, and you just keep going. But I'm really proud of y'all. I'm probably more excited to do this with y'all than y'all are with me because I know what it takes to do what you're doing, and I want you to keep going. And wherever you plan on doing this, I want you to multiply it by 10 because it'll be even greater than you ever realized if you believe in that.
Yes, thank you. Chris, can you hear me again? Am I back on?
Yeah, you're on.
Okay, good. Yeah, thank you so much, Uncle Moody. And again, thank you for kind of working through this with us and for some of the technical issues that were happening. But yeah, it's been a great conversation. I'm glad that everybody had a chance to listen and kind of absorb this conversation. We're going to give away a signed copy of this book to one of the listeners that's on this call. So if you are listening still, write one of your favorite takeaways from this conversation on the feed. We'll put it into a randomizer, and then we'll send a copy of that book away, as well as we're going to have one on social media. So if you do want a copy of this book, Fighting Through the Fear, please make sure to comment on the community feed. With that being said, if there's no final questions, thank you again, Uncle Moody, for your time, and we truly do appreciate you.
All right, y'all be good and keep going. And listen, if you ever have another glitch, stay calm. Don't freak out.
Yep. Sounds good. All right, thank you again for your time. Yep.
Yep.
Take care.
Be good.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yep.
Yep.